Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Joining me today is Meg Luther Lindholm, a producer for the High Risk High series. Meg, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into High Risk High, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, I'm originally from New York City. I worked in public radio and loved it, and so when I came out here, it seemed like a natural fit to come to Prairie Public and start doing projects as a freelance producer for Prairie Public. So I had done one previous project before I got involved in producing High Risk High.
Well, you kind of led into it. How did you become involved with sort of Prairie Public in producing this series in particular? So how did it come about? Because I know we talked about it for a number of years, really, when you talked about trying to find the funding for it.
I was in my car driving one day, and I was listening to Prairie Public, and Todd McDonald, the newscaster, came on and gave a very interesting statistic, which was that North Dakota ranked first in the country for self-identified college-aged binge drinkers. And I heard that statistic, it just jumped out of the radio at me. I just thought, what is that about? I mean, why are we ranking #1 in the country for binge drinking? It just was a huge screaming question. So I kind of sat on it for a while, thought about it, kind of looked at how the media was covering the issue, and saw that really the only time I was hearing about drinking or reading about drinking was when something really tragic happened, like a death from an alcohol overdose. And I thought, wait a minute, you know, there's more we could be doing on this issue, and that's exactly what public radio is so good at doing. And so I went to Bill Thomas, the director, and I said, why don't we try to do something on this issue? It seems like there's a lot that isn't being covered that we could be doing, and he agreed. And so about 2 years later, High Risk High, Youth Drinking in North Dakota was born.
Well, and unfortunately, sometimes it takes a while to find the funding to help get these things.
Right.
But I know a lot of work went in to sort of getting the stories through interviews and research. Can you talk about sort of the process?
Well, there was research. I mean, there was just going on the internet and reading what I could and starting to make contacts and talking to different people around the state. The thing we realized kind of early on is that we wanted to reach young people. Young people are the ones that are dealing with the problem or that we wanted to focus on. And we felt the best way to reach young people is through other young people. So then part of the effort became reaching out and finding young people who are willing to share their stories very publicly on what are some of the negative impacts of drinking and how is it that alcohol can hurt people. You know, we all kind of hear about the fun parties that go on, the things that, you know, kids say about having fun drinking. Well, we knew there was another side to the story, and so we were able to reach out and find young people around the state who are willing to open up and talk about the different ways in which alcohol has negatively impacted their lives and record some of those stories and bring them into the project.
Did you find a reluctance from a lot of people to talk about this, or did you have a, I don't want to say an easy time finding people that were willing to talk about it?
Yeah, not easy. You know, you do have to make a lot of inquiries, but you know, if you just persist, eventually you do find people. I find that, or I have found that college students, maybe being a little bit older, some of them having come through a drinking problem, now having been through recovery, were a little more comfortable talking about it because it's in their past. You know, they're now in recovery, they're doing better, so they're able to reflect on their past and talk about the ways in which they really hurt themselves with drinking when they were younger, and for a long time didn't realize it. And I think part of this project, the goal is to try to reach people who may not realize that they have a problem with drinking. They see it as fun, they see it as, you know, a good way to kick back and relax with friends, and don't realize that they may have a dependence on alcohol that is hurting them or will hurt them.
Unfortunately, we probably don't have time to define everything here, but you kind of hit on a little bit of what, because high risk high, binge drinking is what this is talking about. But does that mean someone is an alcoholic or has a dependency if they are a binge drinker?
Well, you know, not necessarily. It's a little hard to, you know, put easy definitions onto things, and not everybody that we interviewed for the project is necessarily a drinker themselves. For example, I interviewed one high school girl out in Mandan at Mandan High School. She comes from a whole history of alcoholics in both family lines, and both her parents are struggling with alcohol addiction. And she said, you know, I want the buck to stop with me. I do not want to fulfill the family expectation of drinking and becoming like them. I want to prove them wrong. I want to show them I don't have to resort to drinking. She has 2 younger siblings. She wants to be a role model for them. So, you know, it's a lot about trying to get those stories out as well. So,
Any surprises that you found while you were working on the series?
well, some surprises in that there are a lot of people doing some really good work around this issue, really trying to make an impact. We came across a program out at Dickinson State University that I knew nothing about called Alcohol Awareness Through the Arts, which uses the arts as a way to try to raise awareness among college students about the dangers of binge drinking. So they do that through poetry, through dance, through video. And I went out there and I interviewed a bunch of the students who are involved in this program. And I said, you know, is this really an effective way to reach your peers? And they said, well, you know, we want to give it a shot. You know, we don't think that, a lot of people said, you know, we've all heard the lectures. We've all heard, you know, the do not drink and drive speeches. And so I think a lot of people are trying to find different ways of reaching out and communicating with young people. And I feel like that's a little bit what this project is trying to do, is find a way to connect with young people through their peers, through hearing the stories of their peers. So it's not the experts telling them it's bad and you shouldn't do it, but it's more hearing their peers tell the stories of the things that can go wrong. You know, the kid who got the full scholarship to study music and had to drop out of school because she was spending so much time partying and knows she's blown her college career, she still can't stop drinking. And she says, you know what, I'm facing a jail term pending, but I don't want to give it up. And so, you know, we're trying to kind of reach people through their peers and help them see through other stories of people like themselves what can happen.
Why do you think there's such a problem with youth drinking and maybe just drinking in general in North Dakota? Is it just a cultural type thing, or what is it?
Well, people say different things. A lot of what I hear is there's really nothing to do, come from a small town. You know, you go to the movies during the week, maybe, you know, once a month or even once a week, but that gets old, you know, and so it just gets real easy for kids to gather in someone's home and drink. And a lot of parents kind of go along with that because they feel like, well, the kids are safe here and they're not driving and we kind of know what's going on, rather than, oh, it's illegal. They're under 21 and they shouldn't be drinking, period. So there is, you know, a lot of these things kind of come together. You know, you've got long, cold winters, people out in rural communities where there isn't a lot to do, and parents who sort of feel like they're protecting their kids by allowing them to drink at home, whereas what they're really doing in a way is just kind of perpetuating the problem. And actually, you asked about surprises that I found in doing this project. One kind of pleasant surprise, because it's not all doom and gloom, fortunately. I went out to a small town, Ray, North Dakota, tiny Ray, about an hour from Minot, an hour from Williston, really, I mean, out in the middle of nowhere. And there's one school for all the kids in the town, K through 12, and a majority of the middle school and high school students have taken a pledge not to drink. And, you know, this is the kind of town where you'd almost say, you know what, I understand, you know, there really is nothing to do here, you know. But instead, these kids who have role models, who are the older kids, who are setting the example of not drinking, are getting the younger kids to kind of come along. And so that was really interesting to see an example of a school that really, and a community that's kind of going against type, and where the kids really have a commitment to doing things. And another piece of that puzzle that I think makes a huge difference is the principal of the school allows the kids to come in and use the school as kind of a community center any hour of the day or night. He says any kid who wants a key to the school and wants to come in and play basketball, do homework, be with their friends here, can do that. And he knows that that's really not what most principals would ever do. He says, you know, we start teaching them in 5th grade how to turn out the lights, how to take out the garbage, you know, how to keep the place clean. He says by the time they get to be 7th, 8th graders, they know what to do and they can come in here and they have a safe place to be and to do things together, and that makes a huge difference.
Wow, yeah, it is. Well, Meg, I understand you've brought several video pieces, 3 in fact, I believe. Can you kind of set them up for us and tell us what we're going to be looking at here in just a minute?
Sure. The first is a high school student named Destiny Spaeth. She lives in Fargo and talks about kind of how she got started drinking, sort of to give a sense of, for what a lot of kids, I think Destiny is kind of representative of a lot of young kids and kind of how they kind of start getting involved in drinking. The second video is actually a parent, Catherine Berry Kopang, out in Jamestown, talking about her experience moving to North Dakota from a different state and kind of learning through watching her teenage kids and their experience, kind of what the cultural attitudes here are about drinking and how those kind of affected her kids and what she's kind of learned from that. And then the third piece is about a home in Moorhead, Minnesota, actually for college students that are in recovery from alcohol addiction, and how the sort of the home tries to help students maintain their sobriety.
Okay, well, let's take a look at those 3 clips right now.
Well, I'm Destiny Spaeth, and I'm a senior at South High School in Fargo. I'm 17 years old. I started drinking when I was probably 14 years old because I was hanging out with an older crowd, and that's just what they were doing, and I've been around it since I was little because both of my families always drinking, so I've been around it, and just not exactly peer pressure, but more of curiosity led me to start drinking. And it was acceptable. It was socially acceptable in my family to be drinking. Maybe not at such a young age as when I started drinking, but there was always alcohol around at family reunions and Christmas and Thanksgiving, and it was just a norm. I would sneak beer out of my dad's cooler or something like that. It wasn't as frowned upon as in some other families. It was more just the kids are drinking kind of thing. It was not seen as a very big deal as long as we were being safe and just behaving ourselves as well as we could.
Because our son did enter treatment as a teenager, and there we heard many, many reports from the teens that were in the group about their suppliers. And most of their suppliers were parents, aunts, and uncles. And I recall one young man who was in the treatment program talking about his step into alcohol use was through his high school football coach. In a North Dakota small town, that they would have their high school football parties, and the coach would buy the team liquor, and they would have their parties, and that was his beginning, his introduction to alcohol use. And we realized too late, unfortunately, that there was even the phenomena of parents hosting teen drinking parties, under the guise of, let's teach them to drink responsibly. It's okay because we take their car keys away, those kinds of things. And so when we were thinking that our son was over at a responsible adult's home, we didn't realize what that responsible adult was doing. I remember when we first moved here seeing a billboard that said, "Parents, underage drinking is illegal!" And I looked at that billboard and thought, well, that's really odd. What parent needs to be told that? Well, then a couple years down the road, it's like, yes, we need those billboards. We need to remind parents that underage drinking is illegal. I think that the most effective thing that a parent can do right now is to honor the drinking age. There's a reason that the drinking age is 21. And one of the good reasons is physiological research that shows that drinking before 21 is damaging. It damages liver, it damages brains, and I'm not so sure that information is out there. And I fully believe that if parents truly knew what alcohol was doing to their children physiologically, that they would reconsider being so cavalier about underage drinking.
It's important for me to live in a house where I know there's no alcohol, because it takes away the temptation, for one. The house for me is sort of a stepping stone until I'm able to live healthy by myself.
Molly started drinking at age 12,
By the time she was 19, she had developed a habit she couldn't break. She went in and out of treatment programs, but still couldn't kick the habit. The turning point came the day she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person she had become.
When I looked in the mirror, I, of course, saw myself, but my eyes were empty. They were hopeless and helpless, and I looked hopeless and helpless and just sad, really sad. And I knew there was a better life out there. I remembered when I was younger or even a child that I remember being happy, and I wanted to be happy again. I wanted to feel feelings again, because for so long I had numbed all feelings and emotions with drinking.
One thing anyone living at Amethyst Manor will tell you is that recovery from alcohol addiction is really, really hard, and often there are setbacks, which Molly and most of the others have experienced.
I was 8 months sober, and I just was, something pretty bad happened to me, and instead of talking about it and calling somebody, I isolated and I ended up drinking.
It's not as much about quitting the substance as it is about changing your whole life.
Resident manager Jonathan George.
The difficult part is, not going back to the same people that you were using with, not putting yourself in the same situations. We're talking about more than just I need to find a new hobby. We're talking about changing your group of friends, changing your entire means of coping.
Molly recently had another relapse and had to leave Amethyst Manor. But for 8 months she didn't drink, which goes to show that recovery is often not a straight line, but rather a path with ups and downs. Hopefully, over time, with dedication, hard work, and lots of support, Molly will achieve her goal of a life without alcohol.
So Meg, what's the reaction been to the series thus far?
I think it's been very positive, A lot of people say, thank you for bringing attention to this issue, to this problem, to what people are trying to do about it. I kind of feel like it's a little bit like the elephant in the room, It's something that everybody's aware of, but that people are happy is being talked about in this way, in kind of a serious way, looking at the issue from a lot of different angles, a lot of different people's experiences, talking about the difficulties of recovery, talking about, what it takes and how it affects families and, what happens when you get a DUI, what does that do? How are lives really affected by alcohol? And whole families. If someone who goes out drinking and then gets into a drunk driving accident and dies, well, the family has to live with that, for years and years and years. So there's just so many different angles and perspectives to this issue, and I think, people are pleased that we're dealing with as many of those as we can.
Well, as we're here watching a little video, but this project was sort of a radio project, but also the web. And was there a reason to decide to do it that way? And can you talk about that?
Well, we wanted to reach the large audience that radio reaches around the state. We also really wanted to target young people because, again, they're the ones struggling with the issue, dealing directly with the issue. We wanted to make sure we were reaching them. So we felt the website was the best way to do that, and we're marketing it to every school in the state, elementary, middle, and high school, and trying to get the word out, repeatedly to principals and teachers and parents and anyone who might be interested. So we've put things on the website that make it user-friendly for teachers to use, to play a segment and then have discussion questions that they can use with their students to kind of get at what are some of the issues that the person in the video or the story is talking about, to really, promote more conversation, more awareness among students.
And I guess I would like to at least say or ask that even though the statistics said North Dakota ranked #1 in youth binge drinking, I think is what you said, Todd McDonald made something like that. This is not uncommon throughout the U.S., is it not? Or did
No,
you
no,
see?
not at all. I mean, it's a problem all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
What jumped out at me is that we ranked #1.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, what is that about? Why North Dakota? What is it? What are the different reasons that people can give for why it is such a problem here?
And do you think maybe there is more awareness through, unfortunately, deaths. You mentioned deaths being attributed to drunk driver drinking. And I mean, you hate that you have to say that's what raises the awareness. We hope this series will do that.
Well, it raises the awareness, but it raises the awareness temporarily. And what we wanted to do was raise awareness on a more sustained basis. So that's why we're playing the stories, you know, throughout the day on the news programs on Prairie Public, you know, over a period of months, you know, and not connected to any tragedy necessarily, just to say, you know, this is an issue, it's ongoing, and here's some different aspects of it.
Here's a question that, do you, in your research and what you know now, do experts think 21 is drinking age is a good thing, or does it make a difference if it's 18 or 19?
Yeah, I haven't gotten any, you know, kind of consensus on that point of view. I mean, there are good arguments to be made on both sides of the issue. I was out at Minot State a couple of weeks ago talking to students there. 40% of Minot State students are from Canada, and in Canada, the drinking age is either 18 or 19, depending on the province, whereas here it's 21. So I set up sort of a debate among 2 Canadian students and 2 American students, you know, and part of the debate was what should the drinking age be, you know, and there were good arguments on both sides that, you know, if you can, you know, be enlisted or volunteer to be in the military, you know, why shouldn't you be able to drink? If you're given these responsibilities in certain areas, why not the responsibility to drink, and why not have it be above board and have it be something a little bit more controllable because it is above board, versus those who say, hey, you know, the drinking age used to be 18 in a lot of parts of the country. It was raised to 21, and there has been a positive impact in terms of a reduction in the number of drunk driving deaths. And so, you know, having the age be 21 is seen by many as important as a way to keep more young people from dying in tragic accidents.
We heard on the video about adults enabling underage drinking, whether it's parents allowing it to happen at their home and saying it's at least under supervision, so to speak, or a high school coach introduced some of his athletes to it. Can you kind of expand a bit on that and maybe what the culture has been, or what you found?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of an attitude or something that I've heard from a number of people, that there's just kind of this feeling among a lot of parents that if they have the kids drinking in their homes, then they're protecting them. You know, they aren't getting into cars and driving, they're monitoring what's going on. But the fact is that drinking under the age of 21 is illegal. So that even though if you feel like you're keeping your kids safe, you know, you're still condoning something that is illegal. And there have been certainly serious problems with, you know, people drinking in other people's homes, and that's where some of the tragedies occur. So.
Well, and you commented on it, and it stuck in me that you said some of the individuals are using poetry, and you said the arts to sort of tell their experiences, and well, so they're going to continue to try that. Is that what you said?
Yeah, there's one young guy that I met out at Dickinson State. He's a wrestler. He's won all kinds of top national awards for wrestling. He's the last guy you would think would turn into a poet or an essayist, but he almost lost his life in a drunk driving accident, kind of had his pickup truck flip on top of him, had to be put into a coma for 5 days to stabilize his body so that he wouldn't go into convulsions and die. And he has now become an educator of sorts. He writes essays about his experiences in the hospital, what it was like, the loneliness of being in the hospital room, not being able to talk because his jaw was wired shut. And he really tries to talk to other young people about his experiences.
Do you ever foresee North Dakota sort of ranking better, getting a handle on this in the future, or is this just going to be a struggle as long as alcohol is available and legal?
I think there's a lot going on in the state, and I do think that it's very possible to make improvements. I think there's legislation that's going to be introduced. There's a ballot initiative that there's a group of people working on to raise the tax on alcohol so that there would be more money available for prevention programs. There is more funding being made available for prevention. So I don't see that anything is fixed or permanent. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, how long will the High Risk High series or the project sort of continue, and what do you hope going forward?
Well, we're going to continue the project through airing the stories through at least March, and then we're probably going to go on hiatus for a little bit, and then we do hope to resume. We need to go through the grant rounds again, and then hope to resume in the fall. So we do see continuing this project. There's a lot more to do, and so we hope to continue.
Well, with that said, though, even with the hiatus, then there will be information available and out there. And if people want more information, where can they
Absolutely.
go?
Absolutely. The website isn't going anywhere, and that's really what we think, people can most easily access, and that's www.highriskhigh.org. So anyone can go there and find all the stories from the project, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about the website. So.
And of course, they can go to Prairie Public and link to it
And
also.
absolutely go to the
So-
Prairie Public website.
Well, Meg, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have for Prairie Pulse this week. And as always, thanks for watching.